Hello and welcome to part 3 of my podcast. Today I'm gonna finish what I started with chapter 7.
She just went to the main office.
Alright. Thank you.
Yep.
And talk about how they defended castles back in the Middle Ages. Typically they would use wooden walls to decrease the labor because it's much lighter than stone walls, but as warfare became more advanced and destructive, they started making stone walls. With catapults and battering rams. All this terrible stuff. There were even siege towers where they would climb up to the wall and try to climb over. And hooks and ladders. Just all sorts of things where they would try to go over the wall, or they would try to destroy the wall, or they'd try to go through the gates. Just all sorts of stuff. And, it just can't be covered in 20 minutes in chapter 7, so I'm still in section 2 with all of this information. And anyway, we start to get into chivalry and restrictions of power. People start to become more civilized and much more economic in the world. We start to see some familiar countries coming out, like England and France. It's definitely much more like us as we get further in history. The medieval church was basically the beginning of church for the world. And it was basically like, when you get married, you can't really, break up from your partner until one of you dies or something like that. And it was really hard for people who lived under the church because sometimes they would get into disputes. And women were more like slaves to men who would just go around and take care of the house, take care of their children, while the men went out and hunted. So you know the story. And we start to learn about the Jews in Europe. And this is actually why the Holocaust happened. It's because back then, with Charlemagne and everything, it kind of just played into history, and then people in the future kind of thought they were right and just repeated what they were doing. But there was also an agricultural revolution. Some countries fell behind the agricultural revolution, like Russia and Japan, because they wanted to be isolated from the world and they didn't really care about what they were doing. And towns started growing, farming became better, and the middle class, all sorts of things started to change. And that's kind of what life is about, if you really think about it. So not really much else to talk about other than the commercial revolution and stuff like that, people traveling everywhere, but we'll leave it off here.